Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our brown bag session. It's fantastic that today we can have Philip Yeo joining us. I know Philip and I sit on the board of Sunway, and that's how I got to know him. He's a man of wisdom. He has tremendous experience. I mean, if you look at his CV, a very, very long CV, one of the longest CVs I have seen in terms of a lot of experience, varieties of experience. So he's got a lot of experience in transformation and how it comes from innovation as well as talent, unleashing talent. In fact, I think sitting in the audience is the gentleman by the name of Kenneth Chu. He's the managing director of Heineken Asia Pacific. As a young boy, Philip, he carried your slides, transparencies, in your visit to Harvard and to MGM, Universal Studios. You probably don't remember him, but he's a big fan of yours. When he knew that you are on show here, I said, wow, I must go and listen to my old boss. And so, but this session really is mainly targeted at our own staff. It's an internal session, but there are friends of ours, associates who get invited and to come in. So relatively very small session where it's very intimate. But there are friends of ours who also log in, people like Kenneth Chu and others as well. So we are really happy, Philip, that you are able to join us this morning to share your insights. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sri, for that very, very nice opening. And yes, a very good introduction. And just to build up on that as well, a very interesting introduction to Mr. Yeo very shortly. So again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason from Pamandu Associates. I believe Mr. Yeo needs no introduction, but again, just building up onto what Dr. Sri Idris mentioned earlier on. Let me just again briefly introduce him and expand on what here. Or just basically building on. So again, Mr. Yeo is a maverick in transforming Singapore in the 1980s and 2000s, turning it into a major industrial and services center, trailblazing in new and untested sectors, and all while nurturing Singapore's talent base. So at his time in Singapore's Economic Development Board between 1986 to 2001, he re-pivoted Singapore's economy towards exportable services, such as the high-tech, biomedical sciences, semiconductors, aerospace, and specialty chemical sectors, all while nurturing SMEs and encouraging direct Singaporean investments abroad. This is as he was spearheading the National Computerization Plan as well. After his time at the EDB, at the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, A*STAR, between 2001 to 2007, he encouraged the development of Singapore as a leading biomedical research center. This included the setting up of Biopolis, and he has attracted some of the world's most accomplished researchers in infections, functional genomics, and stem cell research into Singapore, developing an impressive biomedical sector in Singapore. At this time, the Standards Productivity and Innovation Board, SPRING, between 2007 to 2011, it was strongly focused on establishing an innovation-driven economy and nurturing entrepreneurships. Currently, he is the chairman of the Economic Development Innovation Singapore, EDIS, where he has encouraged development and management of integrated cities and has provided a lot of great industrial development advice. He has a strong focus on leadership and the ownership of work, and was integral in the development of talent in Singapore, both through attracting and developing the talent base. He is also a strong supporter of education and the need to nurture young and promising individuals, both Singaporean and global. So, without further ado, Mr. Philip Yeo. So, good morning, Mr. Yeo, and thank you again for joining us today. How are you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Okay, great. So, so just for your information, Mr. Philip, we have just under 200 people in the brown bag session here today. All very much eager to hear from you as well. So great. I think they're all yes. Let's get.
Thank you, Dr. Ishri and Jason, for inviting me. I thought I will make this webinar as interactive, so I have a list of questions from Jason, and I'm also open to any open questions. I believe that's a way for me to explain what I'm doing rather than giving a presentation. So if you don't mind, please free to start your questions if you can.
Excellent. Okay, right. So yeah, we'll set it rolling. So again, just based on the introduction, you are a man of many hats, with an impressive CV. How do you decide on what your focus and priorities will be on any given day?
Well, the way I work, I take my multiple functions as in boxes, what I used to call the submarine approach. So each box, I pay attention, and when it's done, I move. So I'm used to multitasking. But the key is that if I can only succeed if I have very good supporting staff. So in each of these box of activity, I have key people. I discuss with them, and after that, I leave it to them. So the key is having good people who can execute. Planning is easy. The key is not planning, but execution. So in each of these different activities I am involved, I make sure I find good people who can implement, who can act.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. And perfect segue to the next question. Responsibility and ownership, and again, a very prominent feature of your leadership style. And you do also like to basically give it out to the right people who have the skill set and the knowledge and know-how. So what do you look for before determining that the team or the people under you is ready to be empowered to own the initiatives itself in full without intervention?
Well, in each of the projects, yesterday I just chaired a meeting. In each of the projects, I must find a key person who can understand and can build a team. And if the key person can build a team, he articulates to me what are his activities, what kind of support he does, and I leave it to him. So leadership is from the team. I don't appoint a leadership, but the team must appoint a leader that they have confidence and trust in. So if the team has a leader that they accept and they put out proposals to me, and I will not be review directly with them, I say, go ahead. So the key people is give the young people the room to execute, but be ready to pick them up if they fall down or they fail, because the key in life is failure is a way of learning. If you don't fail, you don't learn. So if they don't fail once, twice, that means either they are very safe, very cautious people, because doing nothing is safe. Doing nothing is no failure, but when you do something, we implement. Every project has difficulties. The key to see how these young people surmount the difficulties and how they navigate activities. So the key is each team must have a good leadership, and that leader must be willing to look forward, anticipate problems, and not just reactive.
Okay, so a combination of proactive and reactive leadership, essentially.
I had a Zoom meeting and physical meeting last week with many young people, and someone says the way I manage is like flying a kite. You know, when you fly a kite, you run, you hold the kite, and the kite goes up, you leave it alone.
Yeah.
Until the kite falls down, you let the kite stay in the wind. So that's, in a sense, leadership means giving the young people, the young team, maximum support, but the freedom to learn, to make mistakes, to stay afloat.
Okay, all right. So a good level of support and management, great. So picking up on your experience, with the Singapore government at the EDB, I'm pretty sure you had a lot of interaction with the different teams, in addition to, say, all the ministers involved as well. And I think we can bring it down to, say, a Malaysian context as well, where I think we had a few problems over the past few months, past few weeks, especially with the flooding that occurred as well. And you get a bit of conflicting messages, especially with the directors and the ministers, each vying for their own airtime. And I suppose you can just extend this all the way to not just Malaysia, but other countries as well, where again, politicians want to have a say.
Well,
so yeah.
During my tenure as a permanent secretary, both in defense, the chairman EDB, the ministers left me alone. I guess I got a reputation of wanting to be left alone. And if anything happens and bound, I take responsibility. And therefore, my view is that it's my job to solve the problem and fix it. So you must have the minister's support. To me, the job of the politician, the minister, is political. How to get the people supporting you. But when it comes to execution, you must depend on the civil servants. And they must be empowered and supported. If you have civil servants and politicians vying for airtime, that's not very comfortable. That will confuse the people. In fact, I was just watching in the US between the CDC and Dr. Anthony Fauci and president. There's a lot of confusion messages, and that's not very good. I used to know the CDC director, the latest CDC director, I don't know, but seems to have conflicting message. And therefore, the political impact is that the politicians get blamed. Why do you have civil servants saying something and you say something else? And it's not encouraging. So there's the US going through this, Dr. Walensky going through this dilemma. So if you have a good political system, the minister's job is getting the voters behind you. The policies must be clear. When it comes to execution, the minister has only two hands. It must depend on the civil servants, the ministry, and the staff down to implement. But he should keep in touch with them and support them. So you need to have what I call the left hand, right hand. You need to have political support. You must have executive action. So, and responsibility in my life, at the end of the day, is still politics. If anything happens in any economy or political system or social system, politicians take responsibility, but they cannot personally execute. So the interaction between the politician and the civil servants are very important. In Singapore, hopefully we have kept that way, but they are bound. The difficulty is no longer the minister and the bureaucrats. The problem comes from you have opposition politicians or members in the parliament who like to score points, and that is something the politicians manage, because it's not the job of civil servants to answer to the oppositions or the members of parliament. It's a minister's job. So in Singapore, we define very clearly, it's not the job of civil servants to answer to the men in the opposition bench or even the same political party. The job of the politician is find answers, solve the problem.
Okay, so a very clear delineation of okay, you guys just focus on policy, and then all the bureaucrats, all the just pure. Okay, a very good clear delineation. Great. So okay, so again, back in your time when you were at the Economic Development Board and basically building up Singapore, you were again instrumental in identifying key talent abroad and convincing them to return back to Singapore. How difficult was it to convince this talent to return? You made it look easy. You made it look really easy. Was it as easy as you made it look?
What I do is that when I want to recruit someone, I do it personally. I don't delegate the job. I call, if I want to kidnap someone, I'm going to do it personally. You cannot say, appoint the HR director, so I'll take a person, have a lunch with a person, meet with a person, and I have to, like catching fish, you must have the patience to pull in a fish. So it's very important that if you want to hire good people, for example, if I'm a chairman of A-Star, I draw a list. These are the list of top scientists in different fields. I got it from my scientific advisor. I said, okay, these are the 100 people I want to go and meet them personally. Obviously, it's a lot of traveling, but I go and visit as many as I can, and each of them, I try to convince them. If I can succeed, 10%, 20%, good enough. Our 100 top scientists, I can get 20, 30, and I succeeded. So the key is that hunting, kidnapping talent has to be a personal job. It cannot be delegated to some HR headhunter. You have to do it personally. So on the whole, I always do a personal kidnapping.
Okay. That's actually good way to put it. Personal kidnapping. I remember.
Even when I do scholarship, very few people are aware that in the scholarships I run, I do the final interview. I do not leave it to the HR staff or the operating department who want. All interviews of scholars, the final interview is with me. And my interest is to know what makes this person tick, what drives this person. So academic aside, they're all brilliant, A-star, what you call all 4 A's. But what is interest of the person, what's the passion? So it means you must try to understand who are you selecting, because when I give a scholarship, that person returns to work for me. So therefore, if I make a mistake, it's a permanent mistake. So therefore, I don't delegate scholarships. Now, not all my colleagues do that way. Some of them prefer to leave it to HR, department head. Then they have no responsibility. See, so I had dinner just night before my course. We are only allowed to have 5 people, myself at home. They're all recruited by me, selected me. 3 of them, 2 of them are PhDs, 2 of them engineering, but they all try to give me, so I get a lot of free dinners from ex-scholars because they were recruited by me. They can tell me what kind of questions I give to them. So if you want to attract talent, you must have personal responsibility. You cannot depend on outsourcing to some headhunters. You can't do that. Yeah. So in all the scientists I recruit, I do it personally.
Okay, so you build that very nice personal connection. See what makes them
I
tick.
have
See
one
what.
case, the husband and wife are both doctors at tops, the dean of medicine, and the wife was in charge of cardiology. I said, okay, I'm in Europe now, having a meeting with some companies. Why don't you fly over to Paris, meet me, stay with me for 2 days at my expense? I succeeded in kidnapping them. I said, so would you do that? And not many governments will do that. Or maybe the minister say, why are you wasting money? For me, these are two people. So I did take them to the Louvre. I took them to a Chinese restaurant in Paris. And they have never, and I took them to this guy was from Myanmar. He ran a very good restaurant in Paris called Mirama. I happen to know, and then I didn't take them to a French restaurant. So my colleague says, are we going to a top class French restaurant? No. I want them to taste Asian food and see how they react to it.
So identifying what basically manages and how they would react in an actual situation. Okay.
When I select CEOs, I do the personal selection. Because if I select the wrong person, I'm responsible. I start with that person unless I fire the person. So the most important leadership is not so much as telling people what to do, but finding good people.
Okay.
And you have to find good people because you will delegate to them to run the place.
All right. Okay, it's quite interesting. So it's top level you can find the delegation, but building on that though, outside of the top level or the really good people, the CEOs or the top scientists, what about those who are just basically building up the talent base itself in Singapore? Like what would you advise a country that perhaps doesn't have the earning power or earning potential like Singapore to bring back or to lure back their diaspora back home, especially those who may have had very good experience working abroad?
Well, you cannot depend on just recruiting importing. You must also develop your own people. So besides effort to try to recruit and bring back your people. So if I'm a Malaysian scientist working abroad, why would I come back? The key question is what facilities, what infrastructure do you have? It's not just pay, but the structure, support that you give to me. So what I did to attract the top scientists, a guy from US National Cancer Center says, okay, I build a lab. Tell me what you need. And that's very important because if he doesn't have infrastructure or facilities to come back, why should he come back? Financially, it's important, but also what support they have. Secondly, is that what kind of talent can you give to him? So what I did was, besides recruiting the top people, I launched a scholarship to train 100 PhDs a year. 100 PhDs a year costs a lot of money, and 50% of them will be bachelor to PhD. 50% will be those who already got PhD, who send out a PhD. So the 50% who are bachelor PhD is a 9-year training program. And then I'll do the selection using a panel. And today we have about 1,600 PhDs, all Singaporeans, plus kidnapped non-Singaporeans. I bring them in, and about of the 1,600, they're close to about 200 who are kidnapped, and not from Singapore, from Malaysia, from India, from China, from Vietnam. But these people, I bring them here, and I also give them Singapore citizenship. So the fact you are funded by me, you do your PhD, here's a passport, which means I want to make sure they feel at home. But the key to them is they must have a nurturing environment, which is the facilities, the equipment, the funding, the freedom to pursue their research. But what it means that all this takes a long horizon. So whatever you do in the particular medical sciences, you must have political support, take to a long-term view. You cannot have a support where the government changes the policy every other day or every other year. Because science is a long-term development of people. It's not the equipment in the lab, it's the people. And training and development of young people takes time. So on average, a bachelor to PhD is a 9-year program. They have to do a 3-year postdoc. By the time they are really usable as a scientist, about 32. So you must support them for a long view. So therefore, what you need in a country to pursue this, you need to have long-term policies. Long-term policies, they take a long-term, what I call a 5-year plan, a 5-year plan. You cannot have policies that change every other day. This is not, science is not a minor activity that can, one day you're hot and one day you're cold. That doesn't succeed. Yeah. So in that sense, you need to have politicians to understand whatever you want to do, you must have patience. Obviously, when I'm doing all these things, there are people who complain, why is Philip focusing on cancer we should focus on hepatitis. I said, hepatitis, there's enough research going on. Cancer, there are 125, there are technically 250 cells in the body, and every cell in the body can turn cancers. So cancer is a bigger job than just hepatitis. And I was right, because today there's no vaccine for hepatitis. So the issue of harboring, and it's, oh, why can't we focus on young scientists? Young scientists are very few. So the doctors complain, why don't you give me the money? I can do medical research. Medical research can only be done by doctors if there are scientists supporting them. Doctors are busy taking care of patients. They claim their research, which is lots of high expectations. So what you need is for politicians to understand, if we develop science, we must take a 20-year time frame. 9 to 10 years to train, 3-4 years of postdoc, and then scientist is productive. Most scientists and medical science forget mathematics, engineering. It's about a 20-year time frame. So unless you're going to take a long-term 20-year time frame to train the young people, to build infrastructure, support them, and not expect results, right? Politicians are very short-term. They don't see anything beyond the next election. So for the civil servant must have a long-term horizon. You can't blame the politicians. So in your political system, every 4-5 years of election, you must have civil servants who are tasked to take a long-term view and need to be supported. Otherwise, it will be a yo-yo, up and down policy. We can't succeed.
Yeah,
it's very important. As for a young country like Singapore, we have no choice. The only talent is our people. We have no land, we have no water, we have no minerals. So the only way is to take your own talent and to kidnap talent. Because your own population is small. You know, I used to say, 40,000 babies a year, lucky I have 1%, 400. So if I have 400 babies, there's enough talent. I need to have 1,000 or 2,000. So the only way is to attract talent. And the government must prepare to take people. So if we go to my lab, it's an international lab. There are people from Singapore, Malaysia, Russia, Ukraine. They're all working together. They're not fighting in Singapore. There's a Russian and Ukrainian in the same lab that I know. So you need to take that for Singapore to succeed, to be a global city, not to be a regional city. To be a global city, I must be able to take people from Eastern Europe, from any country in the world, and add them here. So our lab is multinational. So that's a very different view for just being local people, because your talent is finite. No matter how smart your people are, based on population, there are only so many percent. In Singapore, for example, 40,000 kids to A level, 12,000 got 4 A's. One in, right? But all the 4 A's, there are only 400 with 4 A plus. That's why I created A star's name is A star. It's basically these are the top cream, so you can narrow down. It doesn't mean we forget the rest, except that you have realized the size of population count, the quality of people is important. So it's both a multiple of quantity and quality. So for Singapore, we have no choice. We cannot depend on local quantity.
So building up on that though, we have countries that, for example, say Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. Sometimes we do just need to struggle to justify the need for bringing in the foreign talent, but at the same time, like I said, like developing the local base, the local homegrown talent. And there's always, again, competing interests. Like you've got some nationalists say, oh, we should not be bringing too many people in, or some others are more worried that, okay, they're taking away the jobs. So how do you recommend governments balance this?
I brought in about 500 Vietnamese kids, 15-year-old. I sent my MOE teachers to the schools in Vietnam to interview them, test them on maths and science, not English, because English is poor. I bring it here as Sec 3, I send them to RI, St. Joseph, ACS, from Sec 3 to A level, 4 years. The 4 years of high school is free. But these poor kids, the English command is very weak. So I arranged for the British Council to give them special classes in English. But these kids work harder. In fact, one of the first batch I in my old school, St. Joseph, there are only 54 kids with the IB program. And of the 54 kids, top student in that year, the first batch graduated was a Vietnamese boy. He had 5 prizes out, 8 subjects. And Harvard gave him a scholarship. Because after A level, it's up to him to decide to take my scholarship or take international. So this boy got a scholarship at Harvard. He's gone to a PhD program. Right? Another boy got a scholarship, right? Same batch, he got a scholarship for MIT to computer science. He's now in Silicon Valley. He comes and visits every now and then, he passes through. So the key is that when you take talent, you must also be realistic. You cannot expect all to stay. But add to your cake, If you don't have a talent, so I have one complaint for a parent, a good friend of mine, you know, your foreign young people are giving my son a hard time. Why? Because in school they work very hard, they get all the top set. I said, then ask their son to catch up. You know, it's easy to blame other talent because if you have a finite population, you cannot grow. You need to have this foreign element to add it to this the yeast to build up the cake. So, but there are always the parents who complain. But first and foremost, if these young foreign students are hungry, they stay in the dormitory, they work very hard, they get all A's, then why is your son and daughter not doing the same? I say, I give our children a hard time. So for me, I got used to it.
So it's basically developing that small, yeah.
The foreign students set a higher standard. You know, for the foreign students, my standard for scholarship for them is much higher.
Okay.
Because they are exceptional kids, and I want to make sure they will stay, because that's the reality. But at the same time, I don't expect all of them to stay. Right now, for example, of the 500 over Vietnamese kids, I took them in after A level, up to them. Some stay in the US, NTU. Of the 500, 7 on to PhDs, and all 7 are now Singapore citizens. So 7 out of 500, but these are the top 10. So my view is, out of 500, I get 5, I should celebrate. I always believe the 1% rule, because that's roughly the estimate. It's only 1% can rise to the very top. But you need a 1% to build up the cake, to build up the talent pool. Otherwise, you don't have. That's why America succeeds. America succeeds by kidnapping people. Europe doesn't succeed because Europe just respect the European. So America has very successful kidnapping. But recently, the policy of changing because the people are happy, but that's how you make it. So if you are an economy that is willing to take in talent, give a hard time to your own people to make sure they raise up the same standard, then economy, the nation will grow up. So you need that, you know, external catalyst. So I treat the foreign students at Sec 3, they are 15-year-old, I put in a dormitory, they work 7 days a week, they stay there, their friends are finite, but they are the yeast, they are the catalyst that stir the young people. So they succeed, our young people must meet up the standard. I don't believe in coddling them.
So basically trial by fire, like just basically force, create a certain amount of competition involved. Okay.
You know, if you want to make a beautiful, good cake, you need to have something to stir up. It cannot be just flour alone. So the same way, human talent, you need competition. You need people to instigate or create a higher level of expectation. So that's what my view. But not everybody agrees. Oh, Philip will bring all these young people, give my son, my daughter a hard time. Common excuse.
Yeah, I would agree, but I think that leads us to the next question perfectly, because I think in terms of that, I think that once we do get a lot of criticism, so I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, one of the criticisms was that when you do give the scholarships to both, say, Singaporean students and to foreign students, for Singaporean students, again, like you just said, you put them on a higher high category and obligation as well. To a certain degree, for the foreign students, again, they have a certain amount of standards to meet. But for Singaporean students, I mean, sometimes they may break bronze and sometimes they may offer to pay it back, but you basically named and shamed it. And I think it was quite a criticism at that point in time.
We give scholarships for the Public Service Commission based on academic merit. As you know, Singapore was a poor society. The 60s. Today, we have become a pyramid. So when I give scholarship, I'm very weary of giving scholarship to those who come from upper middle class. To break a bond, you need money to pay back the bond. So I'd rather take students who are hardworking and smart, but come from poorer, less low-income family, because they are unlikely to break bond because they have an obligation, they have to find the financial resources, and more willing to stay on. You take students based on pure academic merit, which some of the government departments have done, they realize a mistake. These guys can afford to pay up and then walk away. All they want is the honor that they have been a scholar. And that's very dangerous. So I insisted on naming and shaming them because it is public money and funding you. If you don't want a scholarship, you do not accept it. No one forces a scholarship. If you take the scholarship, you're not happy, I encourage them, if you're not too happy to stay on, please leave in the first year as early as possible. So save me the trouble of taking care of you. So the idea is that a scholar must have a sense of responsibility. And therefore, I avoid taking scholars from upper middle class income family because they can afford to break bond. Breaking bond equals dollars and cents. See, so and the whole what I did, I changed the rule of scholarships. I make sure when a scholar is given a scholarship, especially the bachelor PhD is a 9-year program, I make the parents sign separate notes. They take responsibility not to break bond. So I'm prepared to release their letters if they ever break bond. I still believe that parents are responsible and they are the culprits. It's not the kids. If you are a 19-year-old or 21-year-old with an expensive bond, how do you break the bond? The parents must pay. So the reality is put the burden on the parents. And so far, I've taken this approach and very few, as far as I'm concerned, those scholars who break the bond after first year realize our conditions are very tough. We expect every subject, A in every subject, GPA of 3.8 minimum. If they can't meet the grade, better leave after first or second year. So never lower the standards. You set high standards, the good people will rise to the standards. You lower the standards, you go at the bottom of the bar. Yeah. So setting high standards, look for people who are hungry, people who are not financially well. Because if a boy or a girl's father is a hawker with 4 A's, I'd rather have this than have a boy or girl with 4 A's from a bungalow house. You see a difference? That the first one is more deserving because you are a hawker son or daughter. It's tougher for you to come up economic situation. You got to help your parents at the hawker center. I have a case where I have a scholar whose father is a butcher HTV, very hardworking. But I would rather give the scholarship to that person than give the mom from a bungalow. Because that person has a greater sense to be uplifted. Why uplift those who are rich? All they want is the honor of a scholarship. So I'm very draconian there. I'm not very popular. I believe I'm right. That it is wrong for us to give scholarship to people who come from upper income. Why do that? We are depriving another young person or low economic strata a window and opportunity to a new world. Because my scholarship overseas, it costs a lot of money. A bachelor scholarship is about US 50,000 a year tuition, right? Plus expenses. So you multiply by 3 to 4 years, it's $300 to $400 US. It's not a small money. So the rule is scholarship, don't give scholarship to those who come from upper income. They don't deserve it. They should be able to send their own daughter or son overseas if they want. They can always stay and study at home. So I've changed the rules of scholarship. Now, there are very few cases, but now they realize I'm right. Why should I give a scholarship to upper income family? So on my scholarship application form, I ask them for the family income, father's job, how much, what kind of house they live in. So from the house, I know it's a bungalow. It's definitely out on the out far. So they say I discriminate against the rich. But if you are rich enough, why ask for a scholarship? You can afford to send your son and daughter overseas. So why so you want honor of being a scholar? A scholar that breaks bond because the parents can afford to pay up. That's not right. Morally wrong, right?
Yeah, but it does build up on your idea that you have to like own that. Okay, if I'm
when
there,
I took this policy, there are about 15 MPs in Parliament against me. They say, Philip, you're very cruel. Why are they discriminating young people? It's not the young people who break the bond. It's the parents. Who will pay for the bond? Your uncle, your auntie will not pay for the bond. So after the 15 all kept quiet because they realized, I have a case. A guy asked me, can I give a scholarship from you for my daughter at Princeton? So I asked him one question. Will you encourage him to break bond? He said, yes. I said, what kind of terrible MP are you? We should resign. So that came a news, civil servant telling MPs to resign from Parliament. I said, I resign because your moral values are wrong. If you want a scholarship for me for your son or a daughter, actually, why you want to encourage her to break bond? What's the whole purpose of asking for a scholarship? You want the honor of being called a scholar? Okay. I have 15 MPs against me. I'm willing to take them on.
very blunt, very, very blunt and very cynical.
I can always
very good
private sector.
Cool. So it's all right. So that's quite interesting to see how you basically develop the Singaporean talent base and also build up that sense of duty and leadership internally, especially at the young age. I can just say, okay, find the right people.
When I select scholarship about biomedical sciences, bachelor, PhD, I look not just academic. I look at whether this young person, young man or young woman, has the potential to be a leader. So I look at the ECA activities. I don't want bookworms, you know. I want a person who can be smart and lead. So I look at the ECA, what kind of activities it does. In fact, all my interview questions on is what is his interest, what does he do? His grades, everybody know, the grades are very good. So you should not select people based on grades. What is their passion, what's interest? Because what I want for them as a young man, young leader, come back to be a future research director. I'm not looking for a research scientist. I can recruit scientists from anywhere. I'm looking for research scientists who can come up to be a leader in my own lab, and he's a Singaporean or kidnapped Singaporean. Yeah.
So basically looking into like the actual grades and also the interest, the extracurricular activities, what they do.
Because me, 300,000 US, right, to fund an undergrad and PhD in another 5 years, almost $1 million. What I did to encourage the young people to do a PhD, because when you do a PhD, you have no job, no salary. So why I did that, because I want them to do a PhD. After the bachelor, after 1 year of lab attachment year, I give them a salary. They have a salary, full salary as if they're working. They have overseas allowance, they have tuition, they have book fees. So they and the total cost about $1 million Singapore. So if you are $1 million scholar, can you afford to break a bond?
Oh God, yeah.
Your father, mother is a bungalow, they can afford. If your father is a hawker, there's no way you can pay up a $1 million bond. So the key is select the candidates carefully. Don't pick the rich who can afford to break the bond. Look for people from lower income. They can bring up the top. They can be future leaders. They add more to the value of the society. So this discrimination is necessary. In fact, they were accused that I'm discriminating against academically bright people. Yeah, but they are academically bright, but they come from a good family. The parents can afford to send them overseas to Cambridge, Harvard, MIT. Why should I give them a scholarship? So I was accused of discrimination.
I can see how it's, but yeah, but it's so building up on that though. So basically by identifying the talent based on what they are, how they are both academically, socially, and in experience.
So what I look for when they are in school, are they in a uniform group? Are they active? Are they involved in key activities? Whether they are carrying some activity in school. So ECA activity is very important. I want to avoid picking up bookworms. All they can do is study. That's not what I want. What I want is a future leader in science, future leader in industry, future leader in government, economic work. I'm not looking for someone who's just great at studying. That's not what I want. So it's a very criteria. So we should pay attention to people because you spend so much money. You want them to be future leaders. You don't want them to be future just another person.
Yeah. So do you also apply the same criteria to identifying like new and interesting industries? Because it's again, you can have something which has a very high ROI, but not too sure whether it would complement other sectors as well. So what do you look out for
industries?
in
industries? What is the value added of this industry? So from an economic point of view, profit is one thing, but what is the economic value of this industry? What can add to our people? So the idea is not just jobs. Jobs will higher value because our constraints are land costs, labor costs, utility costs. So what industries that we can attract at higher value than what we have cost? So it's subtract of cost versus returns. The return is value added. And every industry has a broad range from low value added, higher value. So to be responsible, you take at least a minimum. You don't take the low value added. You take the minimum, they can upgrade to higher value. No industry come to you because of high value straight away. Every country wants to keep it. So we are prepared to take a middle value, accept it, and help them grow to higher value. So you need to have economic planners to take that view. You want to harvest your durian immediately. You should not be, you must prepared to take a longer gestation. So the middle value industry will take a long time, but at least they will stay. So you need to have people who look at economic value, not just job creation, especially for Singapore, because labor constraint, labor supply is a challenge.
Okay, so outside of say a country's economic perspective, then what about companies themselves, organizations, if they want to try and enter something new but untested, but they also want to go up the value chain, what would you advise them?
What we have done in EDB And then we created Spring, and then we created Entrepreneur Singapore, which I was involved. We want to help our local companies move up. So what we did was create a support system to provide financing, capital, equity capital, bring partners to try to grow up. But the challenge for Singapore company is not the government support, it's a market size. The market size of 5 million people, 3.5 million Singapore. So what we have to do is support industries that look at the global market. Whatever they can do in Singapore is okay, we can help them. But I always tell them, I meet an entrepreneur. Last week I met one interested in protein-based food. I told him, you may succeed in developing the protein base, but you have to look at the market. Who are selling to? Because in Singapore, there's only 5 million people, 5 million consumers. You have to look at beyond Singapore, whether regional and global. So I say you must key to link up with bigger companies. Don't B2C, but B2B. B2C, there are only 5 million consumers. But B2B, then the other party can help you go beyond the Singapore market. So it's not that lack of government support in Singapore is possibly the best in all of Southeast Asia. The difficulty is market size.
Okay.
Right in a big country, whether it's China, India, or America, whatever you do, there should be no problem in selling unless you're not able to have a good product. Our limit is size. So we have a company, for example, Charles and Keith. I think the ladies know Charles and Keith. Both of them are drop out from Polytechnic. They like to do fashion. So what they do is that they hire designers from Italy, from Spain, fashion designers, and then they outsource the production to other countries. They have now 250 branches all over the world. Who are the customers? Ladies. Because fashion items, no lady like to wear the same thing, same dress every day. For a man, it's always the same shirt, same color, same pants. For the ladies, it's very important to have fashion. So they focus on fashion that is affordable, roughly about $100 Singapore, 120, and high turnover. So their shop focus on fashion accessories that people buy frequently. For example, in Saudi Arabia alone, they have 20 outlets, just their brand. Okay? So it means these young men, two of them, realized the market is not Singapore. In fact, Singapore is a very small market. First thing he did was, whatever he did, quickly go overseas. So the same for any Singapore company, whether in the medical sciences or in the engineering, you have to look at the market size. So for the entrepreneurs, oh, government support me, but government cannot support you in market. Government can support you, help you to export. We have marketing officers of EDB, Enterprise Singapore office, they help you introduce to B2B. B2C, no government can help you. The job of government to help the local companies in international export, look for big alliances. Because the B in the country will take care of the C's. So no government should try to help any company to a B2C. That's an impossible mission. Focus on a B2B linkage. How to help the local companies find B partners overseas. Yeah.
Okay, right. So building up on the market size though, and say like shifting market conditions. I think you put a very interesting example with your Charles and Keith and your fast fashion. But like fast fashion currently is like it's getting a little bit of flack as well, especially when people are talking about say sustainability, the need to be more circular, and say especially when it comes to environmental concerns. And that is a big market that is slowly coming up and that is rising.
Industry, you must realize that no industry that you look for. I spend a lot of time visiting companies. Until COVID, I spent a lot of traveling, 50% of the time. I visit companies, I see companies, I look around, trying to find what is the latest, what's the potential. But I must remember, not all of these succeed. Right? So you must, for example, in 1996, when the internet was still very weak, I went to visit, I like AOL, Micro Online. I visited a company of Pacific, PSA, the US, try to attract internet companies in Singapore. Now, Singapore Telecom was not interested in internet. People are using my phone, people are using my license on TV, radio. So I went to talk to these companies, say, oh, Singapore, very small market. AOL plus another company. The other company was a good friend of mine. He was quite keen. I said, look, I got no budget. I said, okay, come to Singapore, 50-50. They said, oh, I think I better go to Japan market. Now nobody want to come. So what I do? Okay, I create my own company called Passive Internet, right? Then I realized how to make it affordable. Singtel will find this, okay, we got to do Passive Internet services, Internet provide ISP. Then I have to provide ISP at $150 a month. I said, $150 a month? Why should I pay so much? American Online, I pay $19.99, $20 US. So I launched Passive Internet in September 1999 at $40 Singapore. So Singtel was shocked. Why you drop so low? Don't forget, I have to buy the line from them. So I said, and then after 3 months, I dropped the price to $20 Singapore. Then about the next 3 months, I dropped to $9.99. It took off. Then what I did, I put it on the US market. I sold 25% of the company. I raised $250 million US. My expenditure on Passive Internet was only 12 million Singapore. But after that, when I succeeded, eventually we sold the shares. The internet is now common. By 1996, internet was a rare commodity. Right? And internet, Apple came out with an iPhone in 1997. Okay? And later on, so you look at it, in fact, the key for internet grew because of the Apple. Apple came out in 2007. Before that was desktop. Okay? So you must remember, you must be willing to take a risk. Put the money, you may not succeed. So for me, okay, I lose $12 million. But if I succeed, the money is plentiful. But then you must move on because internet service provider become too common. Everybody is relevant. So my view is that no industry lasts forever. So every 5 years, I believe, I look at new industry. Hopefully, the new industry will go to another 5 years. No industry lasts more than 15 years. So you must prepare to quickly, the moment you succeed, start looking for new industry or how to improve the industry. If your industry remains successful for 5-10 years, that's not viable. You must expect competition, you must expect new ideas. So you must always be on your toes. You look, I used to go to Harvard bookshop in Boston. Whenever I go to Harvard bookshop, because I'm a co-op member, I look at the books I put on the table, I pick up a pile of books, but then Harvard Cook will not help me ship the books for me to Singapore. So what I did is I signed on with Amazon.com to buy books. Why? Amazon sends the books to me. I pay for the freight. So why did Harvard Cook change modus operandi? Surely you can get Federal Express, UPS to ship it up. They don't look, we are a bookshop. Bookshops die because of their own fault. They don't take care of the customer. When I go to a bookshop, I don't look for one book, I look for several books. But the trouble of carrying it around, because I'm traveling, catch a flight, makes no sense. So bookshops today have dying because they are not willing to look beyond the needs of the customer. If I come to you to buy a book, why can't you ship the book to me? Very strange, you know. Bookshops are around. Now what's happening? Now bookshops are owned by Amazon. Amazon bookshops in San Diego. As I visit San Diego, there's Amazon bookshop. But Amazon bookshop is very simple. You buy a book, Amazon bookshop, they ship for you. Okay? So the reality is that when the industry succeeds, they take it for granted. They relax. They're always successful competition. Just like EV. When EV was promoted the last 10 years, everybody laughs at them. What's an EV? EV is a golf cart. You know the golf cart?
Yeah.
Very slow, right? Doesn't go very long. We charge for. So the reality now, you see what's happening. All the big companies are now trying to move to EV because the industry is changing. People are concerned about climate. The reality is that the EV is successful. But what's the EV? It's basically a battery. The key is the battery. You have a battery DC. So you need a DC to AC converter because to drive the wheels, you need AC. Then you have an induction motor that turns the wheels. Most cars have one induction motor or two. Luxury cars have two induction motors. But the key is that DC to AC converter. So the whole platform is a battery. Your engine is gone, gearbox is gone, transmission is gone, the radio is gone. So all you have is desktop. What's a desktop? It's an iPad navigator. The big iPad looking like iPad, that's it. So the key in the EV is energy management. What's the key component in the EV besides battery? The semiconductor chips. The semiconductor, the software that manages the energy distribution, the software upgrade, so that EV car is basically an electric battery plus software. So you are in the mechanical industry, making gearboxes, making piston engine, making spark plugs. You're dead. You're definitely dead. So German companies are very worried, Japanese companies are worried. They're hoping that this EV doesn't succeed because the price of EV is higher. But the price of EV is coming down. So now they're all waking up. Oh, can we do hybrid? I can do oxygen, hydrogen. See, successful industries find they kill themselves because they are too laid back.
Complacent. Yeah. Very
yeah.
But
So every industry to have some troublemakers, someone like Mars or something else. Yeah. Otherwise, you won't succeed. In Singapore, telephone company dead against internet provider. Why should I have a bargain with them? Can I give my scientists internet services because my scientists need to link up other scientists? Okay, we charge them $40 a month. To the public, no, we don't want the public to use because they'll cut my phone. I say the future is not in fixed line, the future is in mobile. So why are you wasting your time? Oh, now in Singapore, nobody buys, not in my phone. The fixed line is just an ancient item. Because when I'm on the road, this is my mobile, I have a phone with me all the time. So this is where the telephone companies, the car companies, even the bookshops, they kill themselves. They succeed, they stay put, they don't want to change. They are not customer oriented.
So building up on that, though, how do you basically avoid this level of complacency, and how do you encourage leaders to move towards that transition, to be a bit more dynamic, so to speak? Yeah. What would you encourage them
You need to have leaders who are curious, willing to learn. If your leaders are complacent, want to do everything the same thing, then you won't grow. You need to have troublemakers in your leadership and your government. These are people that will give trouble, will look for ideas. The problem with any company or country is success. Success equals complacency because everybody is happy, good days are here. But all you need is an outrider to come in and change the whole economy. If not for internet services, the telecom branch will remain the same. If not for internet services, then on the mobile phone. The mobile phone is not just a phone, it's a navigator, it's internet service. So when Steve Jobs brought the iPhone in 2007, everybody was laughing, who will pay $500 for a phone? But what happened to the phone company? It's all gone. Philips is gone, Sony phone is gone, Motorola is gone, all because the phone is not just a phone. How often do I use the phone to call people? I use the phone to look at news, to search, that's it, and email. In a day, on average, a phone call, not more than 10.
Yeah.
So see, the trouble in every economy or every industry, success breeds complacency. And that is the same with government. We are a successful country, everybody is happy, drink a lot of wine, smoke the cigar. That's the beginning of the end. That sounds terrible.
It does, yeah. Oh, it's interesting. I never thought of that. Okay, so it's just basically just stir the pot once in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
When a pot is not moving, it's stagnant.
Yeah.
You need somebody to stir the pot. The same with a company. For example, Motorola. My good friend Josh Fisher, right, moved from Motorola to Kodak. Went to Kodak in New York, upper New York, Syracuse, New York, right? Then I met him on the day he arrived as a new chairman and CEO. I said I was visiting Japan, Fuji camera production, brand new facilities. Here I visited Kodak with my good friend Josh. The factory was World War II. And because they focus on film, today who use film? Fuji was quickly moving into non-Kodak, non-film business. Okay? So poor George couldn't convince the management because if you come in as a chairman CEO, your management team will refuse change. They will resist it. After a while, I gave up because Kodak today is disappeared. Fuji went to Fuji Xerox. Now Fuji Biotech, they have their own pharma group too. They go into all kinds of other things. So the key in any company, just because succeed, is not the end. It's the beginning of the end. You have to find new ways. So that is the biggest challenge. It's the same for government. When you succeed, everyone is happy. People become more demanding. Right? People always complaining. Sounds familiar, right?
Great, great, yeah. So I think we're a bit pressed for time now. I just noticed as well. So just one last question before I move on to my co-moderator. So just last question, parting thoughts. So just building up on that, let's say for again individual organizations who want to try and innovate, who want to try to change, who want to try to enter new areas, but are worried again, they're afraid of change, or they're afraid of uncertainty, or just again they're a bit risk averse. They're gonna try, but they're a bit risk averse. What wisdoms would you give them?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm running a company. I always ask my staff, I have review meeting, what are the new things, right? What are the new things that likely to threaten our business? And it's very important. For example, in the aerospace business, should I focus on just engines, or do I worry about electric batteries for engines, or even hydrogen? So you have to have people asking. Just because we succeed, we should not be just happy. But at the same time, you must give the support to the person who wants to change. The change is a very lonely job, right? And if you don't support the person who wants to change, you will fail. Whoever wants to change must have the guts to change and must accept failure. Just to say, I scared to fail, then you are not ready to change. People want to change, people will accept failure. You must accept, because if they fail, they can come up, they can bounce up. So therefore, from a national point of view, we must support people who want to change. You need to protect them, but they must also have the guts to accept failure. They should not come to you crying, can I get more money? That's an excuse. You don't want to keep on feeding money. What you want is a team that believes that they can try ways and means to change. Okay? For example, in America, the steel industry is dead. But now there are new steel mills, smaller steel mills, specialized steel mills. Right? No more just generic steel. So the economy will change, but there must be people willing to try new things. And it's the job of government to support change agents. The job of government is not to keep the status quo. The job of a management, top management, is not to change it, keep the status quo in a company. That is the beginning of the end. So in every company or country, we must accept to encourage people to try new things. We must support the troublemakers, not politically, but economically, right? And therefore, you must have that view. So if your leadership is not willing to accept change or people trying something new, that's it. You will fail, guaranteed failure. So the good thing about a country that takes in talent, you think people who are hungrier, willing to try it, and they will succeed. So if the key challenge of a company or country is that the insiders are comfortable to remain status quo. They don't like change. So if you're a good leader, your job is to bring in troublemakers, stir the pot, right? Ultimately, this guy will infect everybody like a virus, and they will change. But therefore, the leadership must be far ahead, anticipating the change. The leadership that will sit back and harvest the fruits. Sooner or later, the harvest will run dry. So it's a very different mentality. So when I run my companies, I've asked them, why can't you do this? The key is you must ask them, why can't it be done? And if you go to any government, they ask you, why you're a troublemaker? Why you keep on asking for these things? When I developed Jurong Island, a lot of people against it. Say, why are you reclaiming land? So expensive, how much it costs? And then you create environmental better, the poor fish will die. I'm not the fish business. Reclaim land, sure. And then I had a lot of difficulties. So when I told them I reclaim 3,000 hectares, they fainted. So I said, okay, I do phase 1, 900, phase 2. Today we're 3,400 reclaimed land from the sea. Right? It's a fact. But was it acceptable? No. And he said, oh, if we claim all this land, be a white elephant, beautiful beaches. No, I go out and market, sell Jurong as a chemical hub and so on. But that was not from government. There was not a master plan in government to have Jurong Island. It was a personal push. Because I look at the oil refining industry. The oil refining industry has been Singapore for 100 years. Every time they buy crude, they produce kerosene, they got a gas engine, fuel, petrol engine. That's it. No change. So I say, if we do that, you will die. So why not I take the feedstock, go down the chemical chain, byproducts, engine products, added value. But it was not natural. Because the government says, look, Sure, I've been here for so many years. Why are you in trouble? And you need land. I said, can I have Sentosa? They fainted. Because Sentosa is a golf resort. Because I need a big piece of land. Yeah, Sentosa is only 400 hectares. I said, okay, I need more than 400. So reclaim. Reclamation was cheap. My budget for reclamation was $7 billion, Singapore dollars. Obviously, I did the government bond $7 billion. Now everybody claims success. Oh, it's my project. Success has many fathers. A failure is an orphan. So you must have people willing to push. Persons who are willing to push for orphanage. Everyone wants to be a successful leader. It's easy to be a successful leader when things are running well. No big deal. I used to joke, for economy to succeed, there must be periodic economic recessions. They shake up the whole economy, make people wake up. If every economy goes straight line, it's not possible. And then when you are going up the straight line, nobody wants to change. The best time for a change is a recession. Politicians don't like that word. Say, why you create club? Because when things are not well, there's room for new ideas, new approaches. When things are doing well, everybody is what called happy. In English way, humpy-doody. So the biggest challenge for company and countries are safe. You need people who want to change. You must encourage change. You must support change agents. You should not support and encourage status quo. Now, this the politician is not easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very, very good parting was to just basically change and create basically, yeah, like I said, stir the pot. This basically challenge the status quo.
Yeah, I must change.
Excellent, excellent, cool.
It's very important to encourage change. It's natural to remain status quo. I go to bookshop all the time. They are not willing to take my books I ordered about ship for me. No, you can do yourself. It means I lug it all the way to Federal Express, which is around the corner there to ship it. Now I stopped going to Harvard. I don't buy anything from Harvard.
Yeah.
All my purchases from Amazon. Right? Not because I like it, because I got to pay, but it's a convenience factor. No, buy one book, I can carry it by hand. Buy 10 books. So now I got more books in my library faster than I can read.
I think it's a challenge even I face myself. Anyway, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Yeo, for your words of wisdom. Let me pass on the floor over to my co-moderator Davina, so she can open the floor over to Q&As from the public. Davina.
All right, thank you so much, Jason, and good afternoon to you, Mr. Yeo.
Good afternoon.
So, my name is Davina, and as my colleagues Jason mentioned earlier, we're now at the Q&A segment of this brown bag series. So which means we have quite a lot of questions actually already coming in from the audience. Okay. So I'd love to just straight dive into it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. If I could just get Woody to hop on, because he'll be asking his question live.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Yeo. It's been very insightful listening to you. I'm actually very curious. You mentioned about new industries earlier, and it's about getting the right forecast of the value add, right? But I was always wondering, having seen a lot of decisions made around the world, not every industry is going to succeed. So there's going to be cases where it may not have succeeded. So I'm just curious, in your experience, was there an example of where something didn't really pan out the way that you thought it would? And then how long did it take thereafter to make a decision that perhaps the gamble is not paying off, we have to pull the plug on it? And if that's so, right, were there any metrics that you put in place so that you were able to monitor that, yep, enough time has been given, so therefore we need to move on and try something different already? Thank you so much. That's my question.
When I took over the EDB 86, I was previous in defense. The first industry I looked at was disk drive, right? To your, now nothing. 1986 disk drive, in old days, IBM disk is 14-inch. Big 14-inch drum, cost a lot of money. So Al Shugat, quit from IBM, came up with a 5.5-inch disk drive. 2-3 plates. And each disk drive was only 10 megabytes. It's peanuts today. So I encourage you to come to Singapore. Today, and from there, the disk drive grew. At one time in the disk drive industry, Seagate, everybody, we had 40,000 workers. But the disk drive interest is the components is automated. Its assembly and testing is very labor intensive. So I brought all the disk drives, all of them, treated the same 10 years holiday. And after that, labor helped them move to Penang. Because I said, I don't have enough labor. So a lot of the digital, Western digital, when the pandemic, and then I helped even Seagate to move to Suzhou, to Thailand, Western digital Thailand. You must remember, when the industry becomes very costly, it's not sustainable. So today, our digital industry is still here, but it's now all solid state. No more plates. In fact, this drive industry, the 5.5, 3.25 was basically plates, magnetic, multi-layer. Right? Mechanical production is okay. The testing of each of the disk drive, the assembly is very labor. So today, the disk drive industry is not the same anymore. We're gone. They're moving on to software, solid state. So the key is that you must expect industry to come to disappear. No industry lasts forever. There's none. So I work at semiconductors. So should I focus on DRAMs or focus on custom chips? DRAMs is volume, capital investment, right? So we attracted Micron is here. We attracted 2 or 3 companies here, right? But at the end of the day, they have to move to higher value added. Then they have to move. So rather than lose, when Seagate came to Singapore and they were suffering from labor shortage, we will help you move to Penang. Remember, the move to Penang was done by us, not by Maida. No? I went to see my friend, can you go to Penang? It's logistically nearby enough. You can fly the things. Once you go to China, Thailand is further away. So I don't want to lose an industry totally. I try to keep whatever I can, the value added highest, which is making the key components automated production. Robots, I gave them robot grants, capital grant to develop. Now all the design is here. So no government will be so stupid accept the industry last forever. No. So you must accept that. Okay? All industries will be born, they'll grow, and they will die. This is life infinity. No, there's no infinity. You must accept the point is how long is the gestation cycle between being born and growth and life? It's 15 years usually. The first 5 years, the industry is growing. There's only Seagate, MWD, there are a lot of industries. All the digital companies all died. Eventually, consolidated to 3. Eventually, so if you are industry, there's a very good historian in America on Harvard on history of industry. Every industry goes to the same cycle. Every one of them. Okay? When Elon Musk started with EV, everybody laughing at him. His cars are so expensive, $150,000 US. The latest car is $33,000 US. Now it's slightly cheaper in China because it cost curve. When they launch a new industry, the cost is very high. Or hard disk drive 10 megabit was very expensive. Today you can get a thumb drive or no more, you can solid state. So you must, the danger of industry, any government department, MTI, must remember, no industry does forever. The fact you have here today, you better worry about what's happened tomorrow, day after. So you need people who can think ahead. Why? Because people must always worry ahead. If you have government ministers and bureaucrats very happy every day, then you're going to die. When you have bureaucrats who are worrying, if we succeed today, we'll be there tomorrow, we're there in 5 years. You need people who are what called eternal warrior. What you don't want in government is that people eternally happy. You understand? Or even if your bosses, your managers are very happy, that's very dangerous. I'd rather have eternally worry. The fellow is always worrying. Their life is coming to the end, the industry. So for a good country, a good company, you need people who are always worrying. Happiness is not my job, you know.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yeo.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I love how you illustrated that even in industries and sectors, there's a natural life cycle.
Yeah.
It's so important to think about that early on as well. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to invite actually our next audience member, Amir, to ask his question live. Amir, are you on call? Nice.
Yeah, go ahead. You are driving, dangerous, huh?
I think you're muted,
We can't hear
Amir.
you're on mute.
Yeah, mute. Okay.
Sorry, no worry, Mr. Philip. For you, I parked the car on the side of the road.
I don't drive, yeah. Yeah.
So, Mr. Philip, basically, I'm interested in the example you gave of Charles and Keith and how in EDB you guys helped the Singapore companies go out, and even in your just now in answering Woody, you mentioned you even helped Singapore companies shift their manufacturing site to Penang, to Thailand. So my question, my question then is, how does Singapore government measure the return on investment for this type of facilitation? Because I think traditionally most governments would say, or have the companies here set up, create the jobs in the country. How are you guys measuring or keeping the benefit? How does Singapore government benefit from all this facilitation?
Okay, my answer is very straightforward. Can government create jobs?
No.
Companies create jobs. So you want companies that create good jobs, not just any job. So whatever company you attract to your country, you must find a way to make sure they continue to grow and add higher value jobs. If the industry becomes stagnant, quickly get rid of that company because you release the land, you release labor. So if you're an economic planner, you think ahead, no industry lasts forever. How can I encourage some to get out, to move out? So for example, when I was chairman, our JTC used to lease land for 60 years. So I thought, why do you lease land for 60 years? No industry lasts 60 years. So what do you suggest? Cut the lease to 30 years. Because if the industry, at 60 years, they fail to keep the land. The land is wasted, idle. So now even release the lease to 15 years. No industry can last 60 years. No industry can last 30 years. In fact, you are efficient industry, you are downsized, you become higher value, you need less land. So the key is that you must always take the view that never waste. Singapore's economic value is land is expensive, labor is expensive. What industry can I attract? What part of the industry you want to keep that have the value added? So when I was chairman, I moved Seagate to Suzhou and Wuxi. No joke. I went to see the mayor. These people need a lot of labor to assemble. Can I move them? You can get them. I negotiate for them. Why? Because I keep the higher value here. If I don't negotiate for them, they move lock, stock, and barrel. I'll be left nothing but kaca putih.
But that's the curious part, Mr. Philip. How do you make sure the companies themselves don't exit Singapore?
Any company, let alone, they will exit. So our job is how to keep them to stay. What incentive give them to stay? How to help them upgrade and relocate to Batam, to Penang, to Suzhou, to Wuxi. That's proactive. No government in the world does that. No? Only Singapore. I moved them to Batam when negotiate with Batam, Indonesian government. I like to move this industry to you. Can you do this? Which government in the world does that? Most governments are selfish. So Singapore have no choice. Land is finite, labor is expensive, infrastructure costs more. You want to keep the minimum amount of the value added, why not? Rather than lose a whole pie, why not keep the crispy part, the most valuable part? So in a sense, it's self-defense. Now, it requires thinking, you know. Thinking is not normal. You know? The normal thinking, keep everybody here. They will pick up on their own if you don't touch, you don't help them. It's better to have a little of what's left than to have lose a whole pie. And for example, in Penang, the whole of Western District is gone now in Thailand. Why didn't the government do something about it? Right? In Singapore, I have done Sugate, Western District, many of them. I was worried because the moment they succeed, they expand, the labor demand is high. I think they're very dangerous because the cost will up. So what can we do to keep them here? Now it requires thinkers. You know, the trouble with investment promotion period, there's a promotion. They should do more than promotion. They should worry. They should plan. Selling koyo is easy, but are you sure the koyo value goes up? If your koyo value depreciates cheaper, you better look for another koyo. So you need to be people who are proactive. People who are always worry. The word worry is very important. It's very missing in governments and bureaucrats. You know, I say, why worry? Be happy. Because if you don't worry, you lose the industry totally. So it's a required thinking thing. Because when I was in EDB, I was worried because our labor cost is very high. What is practical for me to keep? What is practical for me to lose? Right? Does that answer you? Yeah. Now I can drive your car safely.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Amir, for your question. And I feel like I'm noticing a trend, Mr. Yeo, in how you're answering, that you're constantly thinking about the next thing. You're not trying to be okay with what's happening right now. It's always how to innovate better, how to do better. I'm going to read out actually the next question that we have from the audience. So it goes a little like this. the late Lee Kuan Yew, as I understood, looked at Shell and tried to apply several different things when recruiting talents. So number one, the power of analysis. Number two, imagination. And number three, a sense of reality, which together make up the helicopter quality.
Yeah.
The ability to see things in a larger context and zoom in on critical details. So was this indeed applied, and how does the Singapore Civil Service, how does the Singapore Civil Service
Okay, Shell's hair philosophy, if you practice it carefully, you will see it selectively. But when you apply the hair system throughout the whole civil service, you create a religion, which means people go by the procedure. If I select people, I use the hair selectively, look at a few people. I don't apply across the board. The trouble is that Singapore government start applying to the whole civil service. I think they're given up on it. You see, if you got a formula, you want to select the top people. You want to use the formula to apply to everybody. It becomes a routine. It becomes a standard operating procedure. Talent is talent. You must be selective. So Shell also realized that applying the Shell principle, the hair approach to everybody in Shell, failed. Look, yeah, I have 5 fingers on my hand. I have only 1 thumb. Should I apply the same rule to every finger? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I select people, I only look for that few people. I don't apply, you have to discriminate. You cannot apply the same formula to everybody. Then the whole thing becomes devalued. Everybody understand the hair, the CEP approach. No, they all lose their hair because it makes no sense. Leadership is selective. There are only so many people, so you must be selective. You must keep it selective, and then you try to encourage people, but not to apply the hair principle across the whole management. It fails.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's always a human touch when it comes to recruiting people,
Human
right?
beings are not standard items. We are not a book. We are all, in a sense, different. We are all variants. We're all different. So you must accept nobody is 100% perfect. There are always plus and minus. The key is how to get the plus exceed the minus. If you are selecting angels, there are limited supply of angels. I'm looking for somebody is between the angel and devil can get a job done. So why should I worry? Because everybody has plus and minus. How to have the plus better than minus? But you're looking for that person with all the hair qualities.
Yeah.
Go by hair quality. I will now fit in the civil service. Thank goodness.
I love that. I love the way you're looking at getting new people on board. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump into actually our next audience who wants to ask this question live. Can we get Mifsal on?
Hi, thanks so much. Hi, Mr. Philip. I too have parked my
driving
car,
too.
So I'm interested in earlier you were discussing the issue of attracting talent back to Singapore, and as I'm sure you're also familiar, Malaysia also struggles with the issue of brain drain, with bleeding talent abroad. Now you've already alluded to kind of some of the considerations of what can attract talent, whether or not industries locally are prepared to accept this talent, investing in those industries. But one of the key factors that talents usually consider, whether it be Malaysians or foreigners, is compensation. And having competitive compensation against organizations or companies abroad is one of the things that these talents weigh up and decide, maybe it's not so attractive to come home. And I'm sure Singapore also had its fair bit of struggles with this issue. And I'm just wondering whether, is this something that Singapore just had to bite the bullet and say, you know what, we're just going to have to pay more? Or are there other kind of things that Singapore had to do in order to try and overcome this challenge, essentially?
Okay. Well, pay is very important because the man or woman has a family to take care. So people cannot live on holy water, so fresh air. So the key is compensation. But the same thing is that when a person comes back, the worry cause is cost of accommodation, housing. So if the government is practically find a way to help them, because it's a big barrier, housing, and education of the children. These are issues, and whether the spouse can get a job. If it's single, it's easier. So you want to attract a team. It's not just a man, it's his wife or the husband who worry about the children too. So when I attract talent, I even have them can get to Singapore schools. So you have to do a total kidnapping approach. You cannot just take the person. Pay is important. So you must prepare to pay more. In China, they did that. China paid. If you're a scientist, you go back to China, give you $1 million US straight away, right? Or not to spend, but basically, you have to put a minimum. So when I attract a scientist, I guarantee a sum for research. There must be something, right? For companies, either given a job, they must see enough. There is a challenge. Now, talent is different level. The younger one is easier because they're fresh graduates, easy. It is the one who is experienced, people in the 45, 50, the kids are going to school, they have a house overseas, how to come back to Malaysia, where to get the money to pay for housing. So can government support them and provide housing quarters, have them the kids to get to school because they got no more contacts, right? Can the spouse get a job? So it's a total package. So it's a different level. Whereas senior people, they are well established. If they are 55, 60, their children are grown up, they can come back as advisor. So it's a different startup. So you must be selective. It's not a general problem because each category of talent has different needs.
Right. I suppose just as a small follow-up to that, within the range of those talents within the 30s and 40s, I suppose what we hear a lot from here is that if you are going to pay, let's say, top dollar for top talents to come home, those talents that are domestic already might feel resistance because, hey, I'm not getting paid 40,000, 50,000 ringgit. Why should they? There's always a little bit of the sour grapes, essentially.
You have to be practical. You cannot take a fresh graduate overseas and pay them higher just because they take the people who are 35, 40 and they are experienced people. They are not fresh graduates. You must pay a premium. You want to pay a Rolls Royce, you pay a premium. You want to buy a Bentley. So you must prepare, and your people must accept that. But at the same time, you must also raise your local pay. You cannot keep the gap forever. It makes no sense. So if I bring a top guy who's 40 years old, I pay him 500,000 Singapore, right? I expect the Singapore young people will grow up quickly to about 350, 400. You must narrow the gap. The gap should not be permanent. The gap will always be there. You can always argue, this guy coming home has no house to stay. So you can use it in terms of housing allowance, supplement, or maybe education. You come to local schools, they may not want, they want to go to this United World College. So you may subsidize that. So what I did for the overseas talent, I subsidized their education up to 18. United World College is not cheap. Housing allowance can be maybe, okay, first 5 years. After that, you earn enough, get a loan, buy a house. So you have to be practical because not everything is permanent, but the housing is important or apartment, right? And so before I've given allowances for housing, most of them says, okay, we need it for 5, 6, 7 years, then they want to buy their own house, buy an apartment. The house is impossible. So you must tailor the support for them. For your local people, you should not bring a person who's a fresh graduate at the same pay. It's not fair to the young people here. Neither should you have the 40 years old overseas being paid 10 times more than a local 40 years old. It makes no sense. You will not narrow the gap. So best to give what's called indirect support, especially. The basic pay can try to narrow the gap, but indirect support can be justified. The guy needs to stay, the kids got to go to school, help the wife get a job, or maybe better still a spouse allowance if we can. Because in reality, because if they're working overseas, both of them, unless the wife get a job or the spouse get a job, it's not fair to them. So you have to treat each of these cases individually. You cannot have a standard formula. You're not sticking in the rule. But you must encourage our people. Your own people must be told that we need this as a short-term measure. It cannot be a permanent measure. It's permanent, it's damaging to morale for your own people.
Thanks so much, Mr. Philip.
Thank you, Mr.
Coffee break, 1 minute. I'll come back quickly. Okay.
Yes, sure. I think this is a good time for even our audience members to probably get a drink. So maybe everyone can grab some water, grab some tea. We'll give Mr. Philip about a couple minutes to be back. In the meantime, if you still have any questions that you'd like us to try to go through, please feel free to update them in our Q&A box. I can still see a few faces. Dr. Sri Idris, do you have a drink with you currently? Are you a coffee or tea person?
Oh, I have water with me. Water is good.
Sticking to the basics, yeah.
Yeah. I do like Philip's use of highly provocative words like successful companies kill themselves, kidnapping people. It was a highly provocative. It really caused you to think.
It does. I agree.
Economies, countries' economies need recession. Most people say, "Oh, recession is bad," but he come out and say that we do need recession because it forced economies and countries to innovate.
Yeah,
so his logic, provocative, and said leaders must be troublemakers.
Dr. Sri, do you think at what point in your career do you feel like you gain more courage to be a troublemaker yourself?
Yeah, I think if you go to companies that are already belly up, for example, nearly bankrupt, and you know for sure if you keep business as usual, there's no way you can survive. So when you are faced with a situation like that, you have to be a troublemaker. That means you have to disrupt the current way of doing it. So my motto is no breakthrough without breakdown. So you will only achieve a breakthrough if you're prepared to break down the status quo. Yeah. That's really, that's what Philip is saying. That's why he said leadership is about people who invite troublemakers. They themselves are causing trouble as well because they have to disrupt, they have to break down the status quo.
I welcome people in your management who are very happy and all very contented, very peaceful, loving. You will not grow. You need to have troublemakers.
I love that.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I think as a young person listening to this, it's very motivational for us to kind of push the needle as well.
So when I visit a company, I always ask them, what worries you? You see, what is this guy asking a silly question? Because most of them are happy, we're very successful. I say, look, you should worry, who's the next challenge? Who's the next competitor? What's the thing around it? Just because you're successful today is no guarantee. Yeah. So when I visit Charles and Keith, they'll tell me a problems. They can't attract talent. I say, look, why must we restrict the talent to locals, artists, or regional? Why don't I go to Spain, Italy, and recruit? You know what I mean? I say, I'll help you subsidize your recruitment of these people. So I brought in Spanish designers, fashion designers, Italian fashion designers, and young people. Don't take the experienced ones, take the younger ones. And they succeeded. So now you go to Charles and Keith, you look at the design lab, they are not Singaporeans. So the key is that you almost find a way. Just because they succeed, they are stuck. Our cost is very high. We can't find good designs. Look at people like Zara. They're changing their fashion every day. But the good thing about Zara is volume. So it's not the high end, you got affordable end. So you must have people always worry. So it's for a company, a country, you must have people who want to worry ahead. What's going to happen? What's down the cliff?
Yeah.
The road is straight, everything is successful, we're all happy. What called gross happiness, there's gross failure,
Yeah, I agree. That's actually super valuable insight. And I also wanted to just restate what you mentioned earlier when you were answering yourself's question about the gap and how the gap cannot stay permanent. I think that was just super important to reiterate. Yeah. Thank you very much. I actually want to invite one more audience member to ask her question. Karina, can we get Karina on board? Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, Mr. Philip. An honor to be here. I actually have a question regarding the economic crisis that has been the result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sure during your long career, you've seen several financial crises, such as the one in 2008 and then 1998 even. In your opinion, would you say that the current COVID-19 pandemic economic crisis is the worst so far that you've seen? And if so, what are some of the key differences or aspects that you can observe from this time around? Thank you.
Well, the COVID crisis here today is not like a financial crisis. It's not finance. It's more that you cannot have your company running, the business running. So if I look at Singapore's economy, the factories are running, because in a factory, you can keep physical distance, not social distance. Because between a machine and machine, you are able, in a factory control. So therefore, our factories all been running all the time, except for certain crises. And this was also in China and in Germany. But in the retail sector, hospitality sector, there are challenges. You can't. So the government in Singapore is supporting those people in the retail hospitality. Then the other demand that we face is that, unlike the financial crisis, there are demand on the medical people, medical, taking care of your people. So the demand on healthcare is a very challenging one, right? Obviously, the government has been proactive and trying to get the vaccine, but how to get people to accept the vaccination. So government must be a propaganda, please do it, you're not just doing it for yourself or family. So this crisis is quite different from the financial crisis. The financial crisis was just the banks. And actually, in the earlier financial crisis, the first financial crisis called Asian financial crisis, it was, I blame it on American banks. American banks came to Asia, forced every country with the US government support to open up the market to allow US dollar to be borrowed. Singapore didn't allow that. My boss, Dr. Goh, was then moved to MAS. He didn't allow any US dollar to be borrowed. Indonesia accepted it, Malaysia accepted it, Thailand accepted it, Korea accepted it. They all went to trouble. So that was mismanagement. Because the US bank coming today, I remember what was happening in Indonesia, $1 US, 2,000 rupiah. Financial crisis, $1 US, 16,000 rupiah. How do you pay back? It's not that business was wrong. In fact, all the Indonesian business problems, they over borrow. US interest rate was so cheap, they borrow, and they failed because they went bankrupt, not because of business. So this crisis is not a financial, it's a operating crisis of healthcare, of industries, or services. Industries can run, services can't, retail. So hotels suffer, hotel, shopping mall. But the places that we try to control are the food area. There we limit the number of people, but so far they are now coming back. So now Singapore allow 5. We want to relax, but when nobody can buy, eat there, it's very difficult. So the retail in terms of the food stores, the restaurants, they all suffer. So now we are trying to book a lunch or dinner, coming for Chinese New Year, no more table, no more chair left. So so hopefully the key is to get your people vaccinated, allow industry to operate where it's possible, safety. For example, in office, you have certain days you can work, certain days stay at home, right? So it's a management issue. But the key at the end of the day is not a financial credit. Well, government can help by helping companies subsidize their rental, make up pay for the employer to keep the workers. All this can be done. But long term, to get the people vaccinated, to improve the healthcare, make sure that after this situation, we pay more attention to healthcare services and capacity, because nobody can predict the volume. For example, Omicron now, the volume has gone up, but the cases are very short. So after 3 days, they're out. So which means we need a lot of bed, but it need not be high value, only a place for them to be observed. So you need to have more primary care rather than tertiary care. So the government look at healthcare. In financial crisis, in the 2003 SARS, Singapore suffered 34 deaths. Then we came out of it, we better build ICU. Today we have 1,000 ICUs, but most of them are, right now there are only 13 patients in ICU. And the other ICU, another 40% are non-COVID cases. So we have around 45% capacity. So we have to worry about healthcare capacity. Every government must worry about health capacity. And that is an issue because the next pandemic, we don't know. So hopefully things will get back to normal by the middle of this year, hopefully, because more and more people are vaccinated, they are taking booster now, but you need to keep the physical distance and masking as best as you can. In fact, interesting, with the masking, the cases of flu have gone down. So it means masking is a healthy practice. Right? In Singapore, everywhere a mask. If you don't wear a mask, you get booked by government, first fine, second fine. And in the US, people go around, now there are more and more cases. So this is a different crisis. But what I would like to tell you is that our manufacturing industry have not been affected. We kept that going. We took very strict how many people per machine, how many there, allow the people to continue, keep social distance. So I found this from the Korean ambassador who visited me last year. He said, Mr. Yeo, in our factories in Korea, no stoppage. Shortage was the food, restaurants, so Korea is same as China. China's factory kept running. You know the disruption. And I asked my German friends, I said, yeah, German government told factories where we can keep social distance, wear masks, make sure they're vaccinated. No, the key is the services sector that the government has to worry. So after COVID, why do you need to be office every day? Well, everybody need to affect office. Do you need can do more and more online? Depends. So the nature of work will change. So, and so something that we have to, so looking back, if we look ahead, the government should worry now, after post-COVID, what do we do? They should know after COVID, we can celebrate. There will be another epidemic, you know. The viruses are very good. They will continue. Every now and then they're scared. So we have to worry about, and don't forget the population is aging. I'm quite sure the same. We have to spend more money on healthcare. We need to build more healthcare facilities. Should the government do it by itself, or should the government outsource finance, healthcare in a public way? So it's a different crisis.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
The financial crisis is very short. This crisis is 2 years plus. It's the longest one. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question, Karina.
Yes, it did, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Philip, for your insight.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting how different the pandemic actually is and how our priorities are very different now compared to the crisis of the past. Unfortunately, now we do have one last question, and this is for both you, Mr. Yeo, and Datuk Sri Idris. Can we get the yes, hello, Datuk Sri. So I'm going to jump straight into my question, which is really just that now that we've kicked off the start of 2022, after slowly coming out of the pandemic, what are three resolutions that you have set for yourself this year? Mr. Yeo, if you can so kindly answer first, what are your 3 resolutions?
My resolutions, can I start traveling? Jokingly, I've not been traveling for the last 2 years. But my own view is that we have to get back to life as best as we can, but more concerned about future variants. That's reality. And also to spend more time. The good thing about the pandemic is we spend more time with family. And now we also miss our friends, our associates overseas. So hopefully, post-COVID, I can do these things. Dr. Idris.
Yeah, mine was, if you look at my working life, the last 2 years, I spent the most time at home.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that time. Sure. So after this pandemic is over, the challenge for me, my resolution is how do I now go about doing what I used to do at the same time, don't lose this ability to keep quality time at home. That's my resolution, finding a way how to strike that balance. I was traveling so much in my job prior to the pandemic. Even before this, when I had a job in London, I was a vice president for retail for Shell. We had 100 countries, and I was in charge of all the petrol stations around the world. Yeah. And I could, there was one particular year I looked at my diary. Every other night, I didn't sleep in my own bed at home. I was in another country, and I found myself in Budapest. The next day, I was in Hungary. I was in Athens. I was literally on the road. So when I look back over the last 2 years, wow, it was fantastic. I don't want to lose that. So I do want to find my resolution is whatever I do now, I want to find a way to strike the balance to keep that. So that's one resolution. The other resolution is the one I had shared with both Woody and Lavin. how to develop a new game of the impossible. Things that we have never been able to achieve before, and that we have not achieved before, and that but the game of the impossible will force us to think outside the box, to stir the pot, as Philip had mentioned, to become troublemakers in our own life. So that's the third one, and the fourth one is basically how to continue my hobbies. I mean, I have quite a number of hobbies, and I want to make sure that I will continue them in the way that I will pursue them beyond what I'm currently doing. Those are my 3 resolutions.
I love that. I love that. The pandemic definitely has changed the way we look at quality time with loved ones, for sure. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your answers, both Mr. Yeo and Dr. Sri Idris. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our Q&A session. So to the audience, please accept our apologies if we weren't able to address all the questions. Now that we have approached the end of our episode for this brown bag series, I would like to kindly invite Dr. Sri Idris to give his closing remarks. So would you please give us the honor?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Davina, for facilitating this very well. I mean, I've been taking furious notes, a lot of notes, but I'm trying to distill some of my own, what I call the nuggets. I do really like Philip's way of putting a point, but putting it in a manner that is provocative. Because if you provoke it, people don't paying attention to it. If you put it in a bland manner, nobody pay attention to it. So I do really like his way of provocative nuggets, what they call words of wisdom. Let me begin with what I have picked up some of those. One is that leaders are very good at kidnapping top talents. That's a provocative word. So when you think about the word to kidnap, you need to think about the whole thing. Like he talks about the salary, he talks about bringing them to the best restaurant to entice them. He talks about dealing with the housing, education, all those things that will cause them to come. He even talks about giving them citizenship. I mean, so when you really think about kidnapping, you have to understand where those guys, where the points, the pressure points that you're going to attract them to bring them across. Secondly, leaders let their companies look outside the shores. And he gave the example of Charles and Keith, how these leaders were really thinking outside because the Singapore market is small. Personally, I've also, when I was in government, Philip, I've been telling this story like a madman, telling companies in Malaysia that we should look beyond our shores. We shouldn't just look at the domestic market, because the domestic market can be saturated. So your idea of really get them to look outside, and certainly because Singapore is small, so really force it to do that. And the leaders, I do agree with that. And he said leaders must innovate to stay ahead of the curve. He gave lots of examples of how Fuji and the Kodak story, and how Fuji continued to innovate and stayed alive and thrive, but Kodak didn't die. So the provocative statement that you make there is that companies kill themselves through complacency. I mean, that's highly provocative. It really makes you think about it. I totally agree with you. It's the companies that kill themselves by staying complacent and not looking for. Then you move on to say leaders are troublemakers. And they stir the pot in the word they use, really. And that resonates with me because my main storyline always is about there's no breakthrough without breakdown. You have to break down the status quo. And so therefore, then only you can achieve breakthrough. So essentially to be a troublemaker in breaking the status quo. Change is tough, that's what you say, and leaders recognize it. It's very lonely for leadership as well, but you have to persevere and do it. And another comment that you made, which was also provocative thought, is that economists need recession. And so in essence, you are now saying the idea is that during a recession, it's a good time, or in fact, it forces the countries and economies to change and innovate. And so this is a great time. So the world has to really, you think about it, all previous vaccines, they took a very long time for approval. I think the fastest time in known history for us to get a vaccine out and get it tested and roll out is this. No other time in human history have we done this. It's simply because we were forced, the trouble, the pandemic.
It came with
Another-
a classification called experimental.
Yeah.
Experimental.
Another term that he uses, leadership is about worrying ahead. So Philip is of the view that leaders are eternal warriors. That's a term he used. And I really like that. And I'm going to keep a lot of these nuggets because they're really beautiful, provocative statements. So eternal warriors about the future. Yeah. Leaders who are complacent and they don't worry and they're happy with what they have today, they're going to lose competition, because competition, when they come, they're not ready to change. And then another one was politicians are responsible by focusing on strategic direction and policies, but the civil servants are to be held accountable for delivery, for implementation. So that delineation of responsibility between responsible by focusing on strategic direction and policies, which is what politicians do, but the civil servants need to be held accountable for implementation and delivery. And so if you're clear about it, you don't have the confusion as they have in states and in many countries. Another thing is the product go through normal life cycles. And so Philip, when he was in charge of EDB, he used the same notion in thinking about land tenure. And he talked about land tenure being 60 years for companies before, then they broke them down to 30 years, broke them down even to 15 years, because he knows is that products don't last for 60 years. So therefore forcing you to really think that thing through. And then he also says it's the only country in the world that proactively bring the investors out from Singapore. But you must remember his trick is very simple. He must have thought it. You can listen to him. He says clearly that those companies didn't go to Penang because of MIDA. It was because they themselves deliberately, how did they do it? So they kept in Singapore the high value activity, such as the design, the manufacturing of core component parts, all the assembly, they outsource it. And so they then brought them on to Penang, they brought them to China, etc., because they realized that there's limits to land. And so therefore, plus assembly expensive labor costs. So this is a very clever way to do it. And so I very helpful, useful way to think it through. So there are so many others that I'm not putting them out here, but those are some of the ones that I picked. And I thought there were things that are absolutely fantastic input, words of wisdom. I always tell people, Philip, my view is that wisdom comes from people that take two things into account. One, experience. Two, reflection. If you don't reflect on your experience, you never achieve wisdom. So clearly you're a man that has done a lot of reflection on your experience, and therefore, and you've been able to put them into words that are provocative so that it gets to people to think. If you put very bland statement, nobody will remember them. And so thank you so much for wonderful sharing of your views and your insights and wisdom, and we really value it. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Rest the weekend, rather.
Yeah. Good.
All right, excellent. Cool. All right, thank you, Dr. Sri, for again beautifully summarizing the session and for picking up the nuggets, especially the provocative thoughts, and for your closing remarks. So yes, it's good. It's basically a good thing to have. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our brown bag today. Once again, thank you, Mr. Philip Yeo, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. So thank you again for taking the time to share your experience in transforming Singapore's innovation talent base. I'm pretty sure all of us here have learned something and now have a greater appreciation for troublemakers and constantly challenging and chasing and basically challenging the status quo. So again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, to everyone who is in the audience here today. Again, apologies if we can't answer all the questions, but be rest assured that please do join us for the upcoming series that we'll be having on a monthly basis, as you can see for February and March on the screen in front of you. We have an incredible list of panelists, and if you would like to know more, please scan the QR code for all our social medias and to keep up to date with our latest developments. In addition, a recording of today's session will be uploaded to the Pamantu Associates LinkedIn page and the YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So do please keep a lookout if you would like to rewatch today's session. So again, as always, stay safe, stay well, and have a good weekend.
Yeah,
Thank you
care.
and goodbye. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.